This is awesome. I really like this. The bacon is here, so if you didn't get your serving of bacon, this is a really laid back setting this morning, so get up, get bacon, get orange juice. There's more pancakes. Feel free to partake back there. Let me explain why we're doing a Sunday brunch during our normal time of worship. One, we are going to worship this morning. One of the reasons why we're going through discipleship on a Sunday morning in the morning service time is because discipleship is a way of life. It's a way of following Jesus and his commands. And it's actually our mission here to be discipled and make disciples. So as this plan kind of unfolds this morning, this is our way of being intentional to really setting discipleship as a priority in this church. And so discipleship is something ongoing in the life of this church, even outside of the sanctuary. And so just accept it as that this morning as we're going through this. Be praying about this plan for discipleship and just try to take it to heart, okay? And we're going to have time for question and answer time this morning as well. So if you have some questions, jot those down. I'll try and field those the best I can. If they're tough, I'll get Sean involved, okay? We also want to introduce this model as something that we're going to do each semester. So we're kind of thinking of our church calendar in terms of semesters, spring, summer, and fall. So we'd like to do this 3 times a year. It won't always be like this where we're rolling out some plan or trying to sell you guys on something. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll kind of bring a thinker-sensitive model. If you've been to one of our thinker-sensitive events, we'll bring in a tough topic or we'll bring in something that we think the church is wrestling with. And we'll do some panel discussions. The staff will be made available. It'll be a time for you to invite your friends if they have questions about Christianity or the church in general. We want these to be very open, fellowship-oriented events that you feel comfortable bringing your friends to, that would meet people in our church, that they would hear the heartbeat of our church and see what we're all about here. So that's Sunday brunch. This Sunday brunch is about discipleship, so I'm going to roll out kind of our model for discipleship and what we've been working on for the past year, thinking through what does it look like, what is discipleship, what is the church's call from God to make disciples, and we're going to roll out how we do that. But first, I want to talk about the nature of discipleship. Sometimes discipleship gets turbulent and it gets rocky. If you think about Jesus. Imagine you decide to do something really difficult. You invite 12 people to follow you everywhere you go in life for 3 years, 3.5 years, okay? That's a huge undertaking. Every time you're going into a city, you know there might be danger. You're bringing people with you. You're accountable for them. They're with you on those campfire nights outside of the city where the rocks are tough and the food is much tougher, right? You know, this is a really intimate picture of human relationships that Jesus puts forward with his disciples. And here's what happens just in the last week of that 3.5-year period, okay? So imagine this. Every time you're going to the bathroom in the woods, right? Every time you're trying to just get a moment's peace, these disciples are with Jesus. They're asking him questions. They're asking him, what is this kingdom you're talking about? He's just trying to eat, right? He's just trying to talk to his mom. He's trying to talk to new converts. He's trying to disciple others. And these 12 guys are just hounding him all the time. He does that for 3 years, okay? And this is the last week of his life. At the Last Supper, all of his disciples begin fighting over which one is the greatest. Isn't that crazy? After 3 years with Jesus, with God, right? They're walking with God through deserts and city and persecution and high points, resurrections, healings. At the last hour, they are squabbling over which one of them is the greatest, okay? When Jesus is praying in the garden, he's realizing what kind of cup he's going to have to take. He's praying to the Father, maybe one of the most iconic prayers of all time. Father, if you can take this cup, right? What are the disciples doing? Sleeping. They're sleeping on Jesus, on God, right? He asked them to do one thing. Come with me to the garden, pray with me, keep watch, be with me, commune with God on my behalf. They fall asleep. after 3 years with Jesus. When Jesus is captured by the authorities, they all deny knowing him. Imagine you've discipled a group of 12 guys for 3 years, and you get captured, and you're looking for some help out there, and they're just kind of walking away, fleeing Jesus after 3 years. One of them even betrays Jesus. The authorities know where to pick up, sells him out. This is ordained, but they know where to go because Judas sells him out. And when you return, one of them, Thomas, doesn't even believe you're Jesus after spending all this time and walking through ministry. But it doesn't end there. At this church, we like to rag on Peter. And it's because Peter is the everyman, okay? I really resonate with Peter, right? In addition to all those failings that I just listed, here's Peter's unique failings, okay? Peter doesn't understand the parable of the solace, okay? So Jesus is teaching, he's defending himself against the Jewish leadership. He's got his wingmen with him, right? And Peter's there asking Jesus questions and questioning him while he's giving this parable to the Jewish leaders. He's not a very good wingman, right? He's doubting Jesus in front of the leadership. In a different circumstance, Peter misinterprets Jesus' teaching on the yeast of Pharisees. He thinks he's talking about bread. Jesus mentions yeast in this example, this imagery of something that's supposed to develop in the character of the Pharisees over time. And Peter asks the dumbest question you've ever heard about bread, and Jesus has to repeat the parable twice so Peter gets it before he can move on. I mean, imagine this pressure cooker situation where these people are coming to kill you, and you've been teaching in the temple things that are blasphemous, and you're trying to explain this to the leadership, and Peter's over here and he goes, wait, are you talking about bread? This is after years of being with Jesus, right? Peter starts to sink when Jesus asks him to walk on water. Peter tries to convince Jesus that he doesn't have to die, and Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, right? Discipleship is incredibly messy. It's incredible commitment. And if Jesus, God himself, had these people to work with, right? If he had to go through this sort of relationship with his disciples, we should expect the same. We shouldn't expect that discipleship is just going to be this easygoing, never problematic situation where if the church just gets the organization right, that discipleship will happen. As best as we can, I'm going to lay out a system that I've prayed about for years. I'm going to lay out a way for us to move forward in discipleship for this church. I hope that it serves as an anchor for years to come. At the end of the day, discipleship is much more about personal commitment to each other. The system's going to fail. I'm not that smart, so it's just not going to work out all the time. It's going to be on us as individuals to commit to each other through the hard times and work together as a church. So I want to talk a little bit about the state of discipleship in the American church right now. Only 1% of church leaders that were surveyed in a 2016 Gallup poll, Pew Research poll, only 1% of church leaders polled said the American church was adequately making disciples. 1% of pastors think we're doing it right in America. That's terrible in 2016. In the same report, only 42% of lead pastors or senior pastors thought that their own church was doing very well at making disciples. Less than half of the churches, by their own pastor's admission, are saying, we're not doing a good job at this. We're not making disciples, people who are following Jesus in everyday life. Only 17% of Christians surveyed say they met regularly with a mentor or discipleship group. So these are active church-going Christians, and only 17% of them say, I ever meet with somebody or a group to go through the Gospels, the Bible, in an intimate, one-on-one or small group type situation. Only 17%. 59% of Christians said that they did not grow spiritually last year. More than half of the people, or the Christians who were surveyed, said, I didn't see any noticeable difference in my relationship with Jesus Christ in the last 12 months. And this one is really it hit me hard. 46% said they preferred discipleship on their own. So the fundamental misunderstanding of what discipleship is in the first place, right, is there. But that there's such a culture in America, in the American church, that I got this on my own is just destroying discipleship in the American church. And so you probably didn't need any of these stats to know this. If you've been in church any length of time, you've probably seen some of this. Biblical illiteracy is, of course, tied to discipleship in the church. And so one of the reasons that we made the essence of our mission, making disciples, other than the Great Commission, and I think that's kind of the mission of the church in general, is because this problem is pervasive. It's really affecting and causing decay in the church today. And so we, as we're starting out this process of building a faith community in this neighborhood, we want to set ourselves on a good foundation and not kid ourselves that discipleship just happens, okay? So again, our mission here at the church is be discipled, make disciples. Our mission is to bring people into discipleship by following leaders as they follow Christ. This doesn't mean that our staff and our elders and our leadership here are perfect. It means that those people have set their lives apart to follow Christ and his teachings. And we're asking that people follow us as we're following him. And the model that we see in the New Testament is that people are discipled for some time, and then they're encouraged to then make disciples themselves. And so that's what we're going to try to do in the walls of this church. We don't want to see these numbers in that report, those numbers of decline at this church. So what we have to do is make discipleship a priority here, and it is a matter of worship. Worship is what you're giving to God, the glorification of God through acts of service and through acts of worship. And that doesn't mean 1 hour on Sunday mornings, right? This means that everything you do, your work, your relationships, rearing family, friendships, spouses, all of that is your worship unto God. And so we want to help facilitate that here. So we've created, like every church does and every institution does, a system, right? I'm a systems guy. So if you're not a systems person, just bear with me for a moment. This is the discipleship funnel. I also like names for everything. I like everything to have a label, okay? This is our discipleship funnel. It starts with public ministry, which is ministry that we do that's accessible to anyone. We advertise and people show up, okay? They're open to the public. We put out door hangers for this type of ministry. We invite anybody, believer, seeker, alike, into that space, okay? That's the public ministry. And then we have something called book clubs and dinner clubs, and I'm going to unpack both of those in a minute. But this is a way for us to get more intimate. This is where we start to build those relationships, where we start to talk about the gospel and our faith and our personal testimonies and experiences. That's where we come together really intentionally to form those relationships. Again, this is a mixture of believers and seekers and the public, but it's an invitation, okay? People are invited to these things. And then we're hoping that through those processes that people will sign up for a membership class. They will have come to some of our public ministry events, maybe a Think or Sensitive or a Block, right? On September 23rd, 30th, September 30th, right? They've come to some public events, public ministry. Someone befriended them, one of you befriended them, invited them to a book club or a dinner club. They've heard about the church, maybe come a couple of times on Sundays, and they're interested in doing more and being a part. That's going to lead to a membership class where they're going to hear about what they can expect of us as a church first, right? What we're about, what we're committed to doctrinally, what we're committed to in relationship and discipleship. And they're going to hear a little bit about what we expect of our members, that they're part of a committed discipleship relationship, that they're committed to serving the Fillmore neighborhood and the body inside the church. And then that is going to allow us to get to know people on a level where we can pair them up with a disciple maker. That's what the micro group is, okay? So a micro group is just one disciple maker and one or two disciples there. Through this membership process and through the book clubs and the dinner clubs, we're getting to know people. The leadership of the church is getting to know them. They're having them into their house. They're going to the book clubs to get to know them. They're seeing them in the public ministry. And this allows us as leaders to figure out who would pair well together. We take this so seriously. We want people to flourish in discipleship. So we're not just going to put these big groups together and hope you find a friend. We're actually going to work with people to try and figure out who would you learn from? Who works with your work schedule? What kind of life rhythms do you have? Who could we pair you with? That's what we're interested in doing. So let's look at each of these categories a little bit more closely. If you're new to the church, or if you just haven't quite put everything together, we do a lot of events. We have a lot of little badges like this. We're a badge kind of church for some reason. It just worked out that way. Okay, if you've seen these things on Facebook or in our e-newsletter or anything like that, I want to kind of explain what they are, okay? Thinker Sensitive is our intentional ministry for evangelism and apologetics, giving a defense of the faith. So Thinker Sensitive lectures is when we bring in a scholar or someone who's knowledgeable about a hot topic, and we do those once a month, and we try to get college students and people from the neighborhood to attend, and they talk about things like human sexuality, the problem of evil, can we trust the Bible? And then there's a time for question and answer. So we do those events through Thinker Sensitive once a month. We also have a Thinker Sensitive blog where several people from our church, like Chris Egner, my wife Stephanie, they write blog pieces that engage a seeker crowd, okay? So we talk about hospitality, we talk about theology, we talk about all different kinds of subjects on our Thinker Sensitive blog. And then we also have a podcast where we deal with some of those tough topics there too. Lunch and Learn is where we intentionally reach out to the business community here in the neighborhood and also the whole city of Colorado Springs. This is where we just think it's so important to integrate our faith with our vocation and life. And so we want to reach out intentionally to business owners, try to help the business owners of Fillmore who are seeking to modernize, build websites, build a culture where we want to see our neighborhood flourish. And this is a way for us to help offer free training and lunch and networking. So we do these events once a month as well. And Pastor Sean, our community pastor, he heads that up, and he brings in the speaker and follows up with business owners after that. And then we have our laundry day. A lot of people, I'm finding out, don't even know that we do this in the church. So on Thursday mornings, we go to 2 different laundromats in the neighborhood, and we hand out quarters and Tide Pods. Not to eat, but to use in the laundry machines. So this neighborhood has 5 different laundromats in a half-mile radius. And so our hope is that continues with those people who have asked us to different laundromats. Sean and I have had incredible experiences at those people who have asked us to pray for healing. We prayed for a gentleman named Jeffrey one time, and he was dealing with stomach cancer. And when we lift our eyes and lift our head, the whole laundromat is praying for Jeffrey and his healing of his stomach cancer. And so it's just been incredible to reach out to the community in this way. This is a public event. Anybody's welcome to come with us to serve the neighborhood. This is a ministry to the people in the Fillmore neighborhood. And there's a host of other things that we do. Like I said, block party. We're going to do a Thanksgiving turkey giveaway. This is just the broad public service type ministry that we give to the Fillmore neighborhood. And then book clubs and dinner clubs. You've probably already heard about book clubs. We've already had one happen. The women met last week, I believe, and they went through Jen Wilkins' book, None Like Him. And so that's a place where the men and the women get together separately to go through different books. But we're trying to foster intentional fellowship and relationships at these events. We're trying to get people who are new to the church or interested in the church connected there. They get to see some of the leaders of the church at these events. They get to see what kind of books we're interested in, which tells them a little bit about who we are and how serious we are about discipleship. But at those book clubs, our hope is that people who are interested in the church can sign up to hear more and get partnered with an elder or a leader and maybe show up at the next membership class. So we're going to have our first membership class in January, and some leaders are going to teach through that what our membership's going to look like. Book clubs is where we're hoping that people sign up to go and attend that. And so you probably haven't heard about dinner clubs yet. I'm really excited about this. So every week an elder candidate of this church is having a dinner at their house. This has already been happening organically. We didn't have a system set up for this, but Stephanie and I have been having, you've probably been to my house for a barbecue this summer, okay? Most of you in here, I'm looking, you probably sat on my back patio at least once and had a barbecue. Our hope is to continue that into the future. We want to create space where the elders are actually shepherding the church. So Pastor Sean and the Green family will be heading up kind of the east side of town over there by Banning Lewis. And Stephanie and I will be having first and third Fridays. So we're just going to work this like clockwork. And the Egners will also be having people on the north side of town once a week. And so our hope, okay, east side, okay, I get it. Our hope is that we're spread out over the city enough where we can get people who come into the church who are just learning about what the church is all about. We can get them into the home of an elder. And they can meet the leadership of the church, and they can hear about the church from somebody who's passionate about leading and discipling in the church. So that is Dinner Club, and it's not just for new people. Again, most of you have been to my house this summer, right? We want to continue that. We want to bring you in. You may get a phone call from me during the week, and I say, hey, I'm going to have a dinner this Friday, and we have some new people here. I'd like you to come, meet them, fellowship with them, get them connected into the body. I'm going to expect that of y'all, okay? So be looking out for those texts. So that is, again, where the funnel kind of narrows from this public ministry to this invitation. Come and see, come talk to us, come hear a little bit more about membership here. And then our hope is that through the membership process, they go through a class that's going to be taught by myself, and probably Jenny's going to be a part of that, and Pastor Sean and Rick and some of the other elders. We're going to bring people into a membership class where they hear over a couple of weeks what we're about, what we do, kind of just like this right here after a service. And our hope is that through the membership class, that we can find out so much about you that we know where to put you, who to put you with in a microgroup. Let me talk about microgroups. They're intentional, committed, and seasonal, okay? Those are just 3 ways of breaking down how these relationships, bless you, work, right? How do these relationships work? Our hope is that as we identify who in our church are disciple makers, people who have had some experience in church, who the elders have had some time interacting with, they've kind of seen what their knowledge level is, what their character's like, that we can pair people with disciple makers so they can create a specific plan, an intentional plan for discipleship. How many in here have been in a group where they just show up to a small group and read a book and they might have gone the whole time without saying anything? You know, you don't have to raise your hand. I know it's all of you, right? If you've been in church any length of time, you've probably shown up to some small group event and you've been able to fade into the background. That is not discipleship. Disciple makers want to hear from you. They want to engage with you. They want to hear about what you're struggling with, what pieces of knowledge need to be had and clarified, what piece of character needs to be clarified and worked on. We want to hear about marriages and relationships and vocation. That can't happen if you're able to fade into the background. All of us suffer from this. There are times in life where we just want to do that. And it's hard to do that at this church, right? There's nowhere to hide in here. I can see all of you, right? But we want discipleship to be that way. We want it to be real. We don't want this church to be full of those same statistics. I don't want you to go here for a year and say, I didn't grow in Christ. I didn't see any noticeable change in my life after committing myself to this church. And so it's going to take real commitment. This is something that we're asking you to really commit yourselves to make a priority as an act of worship to God. And so in order to do that, I know that a lot of you, your first thought is always, I'm busy, right? Everybody in this room is busy. That's true, okay? But this is about priorities and making a commitment to walk and grow in Christ. And maybe you're saying, I've been through this, I've done this, then great, now it's time to make disciples. If you've been in these groups your whole life and you've been in the church a decade, 2, some of you 6, right? I'm just kidding. If you've done that and you haven't made a disciple, or you don't have a disciple that you're working with now, we want to push you and encourage you and equip you to do that. And so this is going to be seasonal commitments. Again, we're thinking of our church in trimesters, okay? There's 3 semesters each year, spring, summer, fall. And so we're asking people to commit for a semester at a time because we also know that not everybody fits. We're going to get it wrong. Sometimes we're going to put people together where the chemistry just isn't quite right, the worldview isn't quite right, and so we're just asking for these seasonal commitments, and there's some natural exit ramps, okay? If Dan really doesn't like working with me because he thinks I smell bad or he doesn't like my foul language or whatever that is, right? We want to make sure that Dan has a way to exit. But let's flip back up here to commitment. If you go through a whole year and you have a different disciple maker 3 times in a year, the elders might say, hey, let's meet. Let's talk about that. Why can't you work with anyone? Right? So this is real. This is intentional. If you're feeling tension here, good. We're changing ourselves. Right? We're not going with our sin nature anymore. We're trying to grow in holiness and chase after Jesus and his teachings and walk with him, and that is messy work. But it can be incredibly, incredibly beneficial. I listed out Peter's failings, and I do that a lot. Peter was able to accomplish myself as the oaf, right? But then I look at what Peter was able to accomplish after Jesus worked with him for 3 years. He became the rock of the church. He led thousands of people out of Pentecost and into a fruitful church relationship, into a network and community of people. He was able to grow that group to the extent that Paul was able to join the fold and build the early church, and the church was built because of faithful discipleship. I want us to model that here. So those are microgroups. Now, here's kind of a back-end idea, okay? So when I read through those statistics, like what the state of discipleship in America, how do we fight that? Having committed discipleship relationship is kind of step 1. Showing up, talking, reading through books. If you're not a reader, that disciple maker is going to take that into account. Maybe do some audio, maybe some listening of sermons, some dialogue, actually. So we're trying to make these really tailored to the individual. But even then, there's always kind of this lack of accountability. If we as the leaders of this church say, hey, Jenny, we want you to work with this person for a semester, please just meet with them, and then we never follow up to see how that went, we kind of just have this open-ended, trusting relationship, and people have this ability to just float off and disappear. And again, if you've been in ministry any length of time, you know that. It's really hard to oversee that process. So twice a year, we're going to have a leadership meeting with all the disciple makers, and the elders are actually going to ask the disciple makers to give an accounting of what took place in your meetings. That's a really difficult thing to do. If the church elders are going to entrust families to the discipleship makers, we also are going to follow up because we care about you, because we care that something happens in this church and that you don't have a year with no spiritual growth. So in April and October, in these 6-month increments, we're going to have an event during those months that's going to take the place of community dinner. And we're going to have all of our disciple makers in, and we're going to share what's working, what's happening, what's changing in the life and the ebb and flow of this church. And so I just wanted you guys to know that if you sign up for this, there is commitment, there is accountability on our end. You can trust that we're actually vested and interested. Sometimes when you're on social media and you read these newsletters and you just see these endless lists of events, you think, what are we doing here? This is what we're doing here. Those events are to get people into these micro groups. The life of the church takes place in tight-knit community, and we walk together as Christ made his disciples. We don't want anybody left behind either. This also allows us to think through who's been attending, who's been casually kind of coming into services and events, and who hasn't made a real connection with the church. So that's the accountability piece of microgroups. So our hope is that if you sign up for membership here and you've entered into a microgroup, that we can ask you these 2 questions and you have a good answer for them, right? Me included. Who is your mentor? Who is your discipleship maker? Who have you been meeting with? If you're a member of the church, you should have somebody that you can say, I've been meeting with Sean. We've been meeting every week or every other week or once a month, whatever you guys have worked out in that relationship, and it should be clear. This is sometimes a little uncomfortable. You really have to have a humble spirit for this, okay? When you say you're being discipled by somebody, that's dying to yourself, right? It's saying that I'm submitting myself to someone's leadership, I'm learning from them, I'm meeting with them, they're holding me accountable. That's a very countercultural. I don't really need today. It's easy for people like me who have a degree and say, I don't really need discipleship. I don't need to be under somebody. We don't see that anywhere in Scripture. Paul, with all of his knowledge, goes to the Jerusalem council to make sure he is vetted and approved by Peter and the Jerusalem council before he starts all the churches. None of us are exempt from this. So just pray about this as we lead up to this point. How are you going to humble yourself and have a mentor? And then the second question comes with time. Who are you mentoring and discipling? Not everybody who's in this room right now is ready to take on a disciple, right? Not everybody's ready for that level of commitment, or maybe they don't know the gospel well enough yet where they can really share and pour into somebody's life. But that is the goal. That's the aim of the discipleship program. If you go through a semester or two or maybe a whole year, our hope is that one day you're the disciple maker for someone else, that you're actually having an opportunity to pair with somebody and help them grow in their walk and their relationship with Christ. We really want to equip people to do this. We're not expecting people to just know how to do this, okay? We want to help you. The elders are making themselves available to you. I make myself available to you. This is going to be done through books and through discussion and through videos. And so disciple making is an incredibly difficult process, but it's so fulfilling and rewarding. If you're sitting here in this room as a believer today, it must have been somebody in your life who drew you into the church, who made sure you got connected, who walked alongside of you and taught you the gospel to the point of baptism or professing belief in Jesus Christ. Shouldn't we do that for others as well? So again, those are the two questions that the leaders of this church should be able to ask any member, anybody who says, I'm part of a micro group. And here's the timeline, okay? I know I've been talking a lot. I'm going to open it up for questions. You guys can have some dialogue. You can grill me if I had some typos, get me, right? Timeline. I'm a timeline kind of guy. I like to know when things are going to roll out. So right now, book clubs and dinner clubs are active. Like I said, we've already been having people into our homes. That's going to continue. The ladies just had their book club last week. The men have their book club on September 23rd. That is the correct date. It'll be here in the evenings. We're going to have a campfire in the back patio. We're going to do s'mores, and we're going to talk about Oz Guinness's book, The Call. So that's now. You can be a part of those things now. Identify membership class. So why is it going to take 4 months? Well, we have to identify who the disciple makers are. We want to go through a process of reaching out to some people who have kind of emerged in this last year as leaders, people who we think have been walking in ministry and in the church for some length of time, and we want to have conversations with them. When I say we, I mean the elders, okay? And so we're going to be identifying who those disciple makers are, and then we're also getting to know everybody in the church to see where they're at, so we know who to pair them with, okay? So we're really taking this seriously. We don't want to just roll out a book club and call that discipleship. And then February, that's going to be our launch for the first semester of micro groups. So you'll go off and meet in Starbucks, Panera, houses, different places to really get down to intentional and committed discipleship. So what do you do in the meantime? Okay, January's a way off. We've got some months between now and then. What do we need to do? I think we need to pray in 3 different ways. The first way I want you to pray is just that the elders and leaders of this church have wisdom in putting this together, right? That we, as we're seeking, we're talking to people and we're interviewing people and we're vetting the leadership of this church, the disciple makers are going to play a huge role in shepherding this church. And so I covet your prayers. Pray for us as we make those decisions that are so important. Another thing I want you to pray for is for yourselves. Are you ready to be a disciple maker? Have you been in the church for 5, 10, 15 plus years? And it's time for you to start reinvesting in others who are just starting out their walk or need to grow in some area of their walk in Christ. Is that you? And then I'd also ask you to pray that the elders would have foresight in how to go about instructing these disciple makers. It's incredibly intimidating. Some of you might already feel this pressure right now to commit yourselves to teaching somebody else about Christ, right? And every person that you disciple is going to be different. So you have to be a pretty well-rounded person to do that, right? Well, there's good news. You have a place to be equipped to do that here. We want to serve you in that way. We want to come alongside you in that way. We're going to be creating kind of pre-approved book lists to help you with that, some sermon lists, some podcast lists, some different arrangement styles that we think are helpful for different personality types. We want to equip you to make disciples well. So let's be praying about the discipleship process here at University Assembly over the next few months. Get into those book clubs, come to them, meet other men and women in the church, read through these books that are excellent, really are excellent books, and have good conversations and friendships as they developed here. I'm going to pray over this, and then I'm going to open it up for questions, okay? Let's pray together. Lord, I thank you for such a willing and able group of Christians who you've gathered here, Lord, who you've brought through different circumstance and life arrangements, Lord, to be in this room this morning, to enjoy bacon and fellowship together. But Lord, in all seriousness, this is a big commitment. This is what you've asked us to do in the Great Commission, make disciples, to share your teachings and help people live by those teachings. And it can have marvelous and far-reaching effects that we may not even see in our lifetime, Lord. Help us to catch that vision, to catch the importance of disciple making and the fruit of that, Lord, the joy that comes with walking with people as they learn to follow you and fall in love with you through their every aspect of this plan, Lord. Lord, I pray for every aspect of this plan. Lord, I know that plans fall through. I'm asking for real commitment of individuals here, Lord, to commit themselves to your teachings and bringing others alongside of them to learn those teachings and how to live them out. We ask this in your holy name. Amen. All right. Who's got a question? Todd, yes. So if you're an elder candidate, would you please stand up right now and make yourselves visible? So we have Pastor Sean Rainey, who is our community pastor, Steve Mayfield, who's an elder candidate, Chris Egner, who's also an elder candidate, Rick Simi, and myself. And so the reason we're calling them elder candidates is because we're doing background. No, I'm just kidding. We're going through a process of putting together our charter for eldership, for membership, other things. We're just seeing if we work well together, to be honest and blunt with you. We're seeing if we are fit for leadership. We're vetting each other. We're working with each other, working through doctrinal issues together. And so our hope is that in January, we'll actually have a service where we ratify the eldership and the leadership of this church publicly. There'll be a time for you, a 2-week period. If you have seen Steve do something that Steve is not supposed to do, you think disqualifies him from eldership, you'll be able to make that. No, you won't, I promise. Steve is a great guy. But you'll have that opportunity to make that known to the leaders of the church. But those are the elders that we have right now going through this process. Good question. Miss Mary. Yes. That is something we are working through right now, as a matter of fact. And so we're working through those different doctrines. We are an Assemblies of God church, and so we assume actually our constitution is based off the Constitution of Living Hope Church right now. So women are eligible at this time to be elders, and we're working through that right now and praying through that. And so I'd encourage you all to pray for us as we work through that very touchy doctrinal subject matter. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, Joel.
Does membership entail all of those things that you just mentioned? Membership in the church entail all of those things you just mentioned?
So our hope is that if you decide to be a member of this church, what that means is you're committing to micro groups. Okay? So you're either going to be a disciple maker or you're going to be discipled in that group. So that's kind of our entry point into the church. So when we talk to members, when we say us, what we mean is the people who are committed to being discipled and making disciples at the church. So in January, when we roll this membership class out, it'll be 4 weeks long, and we'll say what you can expect of us in this covenant relationship, what we can expect of you, and then we'll go through the process of putting you in that discipleship relationship. So that's what membership will be here. Yeah, good question. Got to have some more. Give me a hard question. Yes, Lacey. So the leaders of the church, not just me, the leaders of the church will be grouping them together. So the reason for that is we want to have a process by which we put personalities together. And so what happens if everybody gets to choose their own, you tend to just have a group that looks the same every time, right? If you guys are motorcycle guys, the motorcycle guys get together. If you guys love Pinterest, you get Pinterest to get whatever, right? Yes, guys, Pinterest groups are happening now. Our hope is that people grow in these micro groups. So but someone you wouldn't normally go golfing with, Ben, but they have something we think that you've expressed that you need help in, right? And so we're trying to put people together who can learn well from each other and grow. And they're all going to have the same qualifications in terms of character and commitment to the church. Very good question. Nicholas.
So are these microgroups the individual discipleship relationships, like the one?
Yes.
Like a disciple maker with one or two?
One or two.
It's more like what we traditionally understand small groups to be.
Nope, just the 1 and 2. We don't have small groups here. So we go from big to really small quick, because the in-between is where people, I think, get lost. Yep, so the micro group is we have to call it group because it might be 1 on 2, especially on the front end while we're trying to build those disciple makers. But we hope to put people in one-on-one situations as often as possible. What else? Todd, yes.
Are you going to create like a questionnaire for everybody to fill out so you can combine those?
Absolutely, and that'll be part of the membership class. So we're working on, we've reached out to a couple of other churches to see what they're doing. We're trying to come up with a really good survey and even a spiritual gifts kind of test to see where people just self-identify, hey, I think I have the gift of discernment, or I have the gift of making pancakes like Todd does. And so you'll be able to put that on that questionnaire, and then we can put people together too. Yes, that'll be in the membership class process. Pastor Sean, yes.
So how does the microgroups, like for an introvert like me, how does a microgroup work for introverts?
So if you tell us you're an introvert, we're going to believe you, right? And that'll be on that, unless you're Nicholas, because he's not, and he says he is, right? But we're gonna believe you on that survey, and that's actually the beauty of these microgroups, right? Is that it's a one-on-one coffee shop intimate relationship. You're not gonna be asked as a disciple to get up here on Sundays and give a presentation if you're an introvert. But whether you're an introvert or extrovert, you need people. So these microgroups, again, we've tried to think of those things, and we've tried to create a situation where introverts can really open up in a very small group setting and get a lot from that. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. And so we're hoping that through just you coming to book clubs and dinner clubs and going through the membership class and being a part of the ministry here, we get to know that Sean is an extrovert and I'm an introvert, right? We get to know those things. And then through the survey process, we really get to see those things come out a little bit clearer. Ben?
Is there a specific syllabus or book or something that these microgroups will
Be formed by?
or is it going to be just kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it'll be kind of
The answer to that is no. And so here's the reason why. I tend to want everybody in here to read systematic theology and philosophy and go back to ancient Athens and read through the Western canon, right? That's me. That might not be what you need, right? These groups are designed around what a person needs. And so the elders and the leaders that we've chosen to help us with this process will have like a vetted book list of books that we think kind of fit a bunch of different personality types, a bunch of different issues. So the disciple makers aren't just hanging out there to create their own curriculum. They can choose from a list of things, but really it's their responsibility to figure out if you're an introvert. Are you a reader? Do you love podcasting? Is that how you learn? Are you a reader and not a doer, so we need to get you doing things? Are you a doer but not a reader, so we need to get you reading things? You know, that's the nature and dynamic of discipleship relationship. And so we're really trying not to do this standard, blah, read this book and show up. You know, we're trying to make it personal. And so that way you get something out of it. You're not just putting in all this time and hearing the same things. Does that answer? Okay. What else? Mr. Eddington.
That's a fascinating model.
Yeah.
First of all, are you trailblazing this or are you modeling somebody else?
So 9 Marks, it's a Reformed Baptist organization. They have made a discipleship model for small churches, neighborhood type churches that are anywhere from 200 and under. That's what they qualify the neighborhood church as. And so we're loosely basing ours off of that model. So we've kind of seen their statistical analysis of how people are fading into the background in the small group model, and they need more one-on-one relationship. And so this just fits our gifting a little bit better than their model, because their small church model is really 200 people. We're not a 200-person church. Not yet. That's right. Yeah.
The second part to that is
Yeah.
there's the two sayings. One, you don't want to switch horses into the stream, and you don't want to beat a dead horse. So how willing are you to evolve this model?
Well, I think it's flexible enough that we can add and kind of take away from things. And so the natural way for us to do that is during that accountability process. That's why we made that back-end procedure. So that way, if we get to April and people have gone through a semester and the leaders are like, guys, this isn't working. I need something more substantial to give people. You've been too loose with this. You know, that might be the claim. Or you guys are being too overbearing with this ridiculous book list. I want to read some heretics, and we'll have to address that from there. Yeah. Good question. Anything else? So you guys are so confident I could pass out the quiz on UA discipleship. Nicholas.
So I've heard the model of Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy.
Yeah.
Where I'm the Barnabas, and I need a Timothy and also a Paul. Is that something where you see you'll both be mentoring and being mentored at the same time? Is that
Yes.
something you look forward to doing and you hope to do as soon as possible?
Yeah, and if you'll notice the 2 questions that I said everybody should be able to answer. So even if you're a disciple maker, even if you've been bestowed that grand, should be a first, right? I'm still going to ask you who's mentoring you, who's discipling you. Still, that should be a first and foremost principle in disciple making, is that you're still being poured into by someone who's further along in this process or has something else to offer than you. So that's kind of one way to answer that. Another way to answer that is, if we get in the context of these discipleship groups, and let's say you're a disciple maker with Hunter and myself, you're discipling us, or you're just discipling Hunter and he says, hey, I'd really benefit from a third person, someone else walking through this with me, then you as a discipleship maker can make that call. We really want to, we put trust in the disciple makers to really assess the situation and get guidance when they need to from the leadership, but to make those calls on the field, so to speak. Did that answer your question? Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for participating in the first Sunday brunch here. Hopefully you all had some good food. Will, you have a question?
Yes. Are we going to have more bacon on more Sundays?
We're just going to make that a standard operating procedure, is to serve bacon here. Yeah. Todd.
How about we switch out those crackers for bacon?
Oh, yeah. Bacon bits? Bacon bits? Okay. Oh, my goodness. Oh my goodness. See what happens when you open it up for Q&A? Well, guys, I'm going to pray as Pastor Sean makes his way up here. We're going to pray one more time over this plan, and then also I want to pray a blessing over you all. God, thank you for an inquisitive bunch of folks here this morning who are interested in making disciples and contributing to the life of this church. Lord, I pray that you give some conviction here over the next 4 months to lead people into a healthy discipleship relationship. Help them to see if they need to be in a category of discipleship, if they need to be someone who is walking with someone else during this time. And Lord, people who have been reticent to lead, I pray that you prod them and that through relationships and teaching week in, week out on Sunday, that they start to feel the call to make disciples themselves. Lord, this is how you've designed the gospel to be spread to all nations, and I just consider it a blessing and a high honor and privilege that we get to be part of that here in the Fillmore neighborhood. Lord, bless each and every one of these people as they make their way back to get more bacon and out into the world this week to live out Jesus' way of life in their workplace and vocation. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.